Coming to you live from WRUE in Tennessee, it's the Scribbling Woman.
Hi, I'm Nancy Rue, and I am a scribbling woman. And here we talk about the writerly life that is unique to every writer, no matter her age, her season, or where you are in your creative process. You are now an official scribbly, so let's talk. Okay, so way back in episode 11, I had 3 guests here on the Scribbling Woman, some of my fellow scribblies, and we talked about being a planner, a pantser, or a plantser as we approach a creative project. And at one point in that really lively discussion, in which there was a lot of debate, author Kay Day said, I've always called myself a pantser, but I'd really rather think of me as an intuitive writer. That just opened the door for an entirely new way, a more nuanced way to look at how we design our creative process. And so as we continue this series of The Scribbling Woman, in which we look at concrete ways to move forward with those beautiful intentions that we established in January 2025, I think it's worth revisiting this whole idea of creative process. So first, a little background. As a teacher and mentor of writing, I used to prescribe a process, which, only made sense for me because I am such an organizer, such a planner. I love to make me some lists. And so naturally, I felt like it was ideal for everyone to, have the binders and the notes and do all the research up front. And I have a 40-page outline before I even start writing, for Pete's sake. Well, for a long time, I didn't realize that that was not the ideal process for every writer. In fact, not even most of them. All of that plot diagramming and deep character analyses and detailed setting write-ups made a lot of writers just break out into a cold sweat. Hives were guaranteed if I started talking about plot skeleton. I watched people mop their foreheads or just kind of subtly sneak out to the bathroom when I was talking about that. I started to wake up to that when some writers started saying things like this to me. Well, if I do all that planning, I already know what's going to happen, so why write the book? Or having to figure out everything up front stresses me out too much and I want to throw up. Or then there's this, planning. Are you serious? I didn't even plan my wedding. So I had to ask myself, why would a person's approach to writing be any different from her approach to life? There is no wrong way to begin, continue, and finish a piece of work as long as it works for you. From the first glimmer of an idea to the moment when you press publish on Amazon KDP, the natural steps are unique to every writer. And that uniqueness is actually the very foundation of this podcast. So let's begin with the vocabulary that we're going to be using. Now, as I said, in the past, we've used terms like planner, pantser, and plantser. But since episode 11, the Scribbling Woman lexicon has changed. The writing process can now be identified as being somewhere on the continuum between intentional and intuitive. Because planner sounds too rigid. Pantser sounds like you don't know what you're doing. Plantser sounds like you can't make up your mind. And when you look at all 3 of those, planner seems to imply that that's the intelligent way to approach it and everything else is flaky. And that is absolutely not the case, nor what we want to say here. The words intentional and intuitive are more flexible, and they show more respect for who each of us is as a writer. The words matter. Again, there's a full color spectrum here, but just to offer a general foundation for these terms, I'm going to describe 2 writers who represent far ends of that spectrum. Meet Maxine. Now, Maxine wakes up one morning with a character in her head that will not leave her alone. This is a character who can't stand to get it wrong. She has to get it right. She has to get it perfect, and that torments her. And Maxine immediately goes on Google and researches some names, something that will fit this kind of a character. And she lands on Clarine. And that then is her character's name. Well, then Maxine sits down with Clarine and they talk. And Maxine has her legal pad and her pen, and she writes down everything that Clarine tells her. And she asks her questions like, when did you start being this way? Why do you think that is? What have been some of your life experiences? And the plot begins to take place in Maxine's mind. So her next step is to start an outline. Well, as they talk, Maxine says, so Clarine, what do you do for a living? And after much thought and brainstorming, Clarine says that she's an art student because she wants to do perfect art. And to support that, she works as a welder. Well, Maxine then researches where would be a good place for a story about this to happen. And after much research, she decides that Chicago would be the place. What about the Art Institute, Chicago? Besides, she's always wanted to go to Chicago. So off to Chicago she goes with her note cards, writing one piece of information on each card. And at the end of every day during her stay there, she adds to that outline that she has going. The plot continues to make sense to her. Well, she also talks to Clarine a whole lot on the flight. And Clarine indicates that at some point she is blackmailed into stealing art in order to save the life of her fiance, which of course goes completely against her grain as a person who likes to get things right. Maxine is very excited about this conflict, and she seems to develop it in steps so that she builds up to a climax. She's just about ready to write, but first she shadows a welder for several days. And then she goes into a couple of friends' and relatives' homes and borrows some pieces of their art without them knowing it, just to see how that's done. And she supplements that with watching some documentaries on art theft. Finally, she is ready to finalize that outline, which she does. Now she can write, but first, that next step is to decide, now, how long is it going to take me to write this? What's my quota for the day? And then she determines how many days she can write, leaves herself about 2 extra weeks, and puts it all on her calendar. Maxine is ready to roll. Maxine is also the epitome of the intentional writer. I don't think anybody is this step by step about their process, but if you see anything of yourself in Maxine, for now, place yourself somewhere on that intentional end of the continuum. Now let's turn to Ginger. Ginger likes to start with whatever comes to her mind and won't let her go. It niggles at her like for weeks. And this one time, she's in the grocery store. She's in Kroger. She's in the soup aisle. And she sees this woman who is standing in front of the display, verbally processing whether to go with tomato, chicken noodle, or cream of mushroom. I mean, she is weighing the pros and cons out loud. And Maxine, I'm not Maxine, sorry, Ginger. Ginger is fascinated by this. And as she's watching her, she goes, sure enough, this woman's name is Stephanie. That's Stepheni, even though she was born with Anie. And somewhere along the line, she also tried out Aney. And she still is not sure that Eni works for her. But Ginger is jazzed about Stephanie. All right. So the only way to find out what makes Stephanie so sort of OCD is to start writing the story. So she takes her laptop down to the perfect bean. And first, Ginger has to decide what kind of muffin is going to enhance this writing experience. And she can't decide between the vegan sweet potato muffin and the gluten blueberry scone, so she buys both. She sits down at the table, and then, of course, there's the selection of the kind of music that is going to best support this endeavor. She finally decides, after much contemplation, on country, because that's predictable. Jazz is way too random for this. And if she turns on classic rock, she's going to get way too wrapped up in Led Zeppelin and she's going to lose the entire thread, which at this point she kind of has. So she starts to write about Stephanie, and she decides to start in the soup aisle because that's where the story first came to life. And before she knows it, Stephanie is looking at this beautiful sort of pyramid of cans of various kinds of lentil soup. She pulls out one from the middle. The whole thing falls on her head. And the next thing she knows, she's waking up in a hospital room, is not sure who she is, but she does know that that tattoo on her wrist of a spider was not there before. Ginger is completely jazzed about this story, and she just writes and writes and writes. Well, she doesn't write every day because she has to stop and figure out and do a lot of research about the realities of amnesia and how that actually works. And then she writes some more. And then, of course, where's this going to take place? That'd be good to have, a context. So she goes online, just starts looking at some cool places and finds out some great deals for trips to the Virgin Islands, just to kind of pull herself back on track. And she decides if she writes this book, makes her first mill, she can go live in the Virgin Islands if she wants to. Eventually, this book about Stephanie gets written, and dang, it's good. Ginger is the poster child for the intuitive writer. Now, maybe nobody is quite this comfortable with not knowing a dadgum thing about the story and what's coming, but if you put yourself in Ginger's place, are you comfortable there? Are you more like her than you are Maxine? If that's the case, then you're probably more on the intuitive end of this creative process spectrum. Now, as most likely, you realize you're a little bit of both. Nobody's entirely one or the other. The point is to find the process that allows you to approach a project with confidence in a way that works for you. So whether you already know what that process is, or you haven't got a clue and you've been thrashing around trying to find it, or you kind of know, but you still want to tweak it a little bit, I think it's worth asking yourself 6 different questions that might kind of lead you to a clearer picture. Now, I'm going to offer you these questions with just a few suggestions. I'm going to allow plenty of room for you to ponder them in any direction that you want to. And again, if you want to stop the recording and answer your questions right away, or just make some notes for later, watch it again, or go to the blog at www.nancyrue.com because this will be outlined for you tomorrow. Okay, question number 1. What comes to you first? What won't leave you alone? Is it a theme? Is it a character? Is it a setting? Is it a single detail? A question? Some kind of vague feeling or a full-blown vision? When I was asked to think about the Lily series, the whole concept for the thing came to me when I was getting dressed to go to dinner with my agent. For the Christian Heritage series, however, I didn't know what to do until my 13-year-old daughter said, write about a history that involves kids so we don't always feel like we were standing at the sidelines. So it could be different every time. But right now, what comes to you first in general? And then question number 2, how do you move with that? Do you run with it or do you follow it? Who's in charge, you or the idea? Are you driving the bus or are you a passenger? Is the story leading you or are you leading the story? All of that has merit. Trust your instincts here because when it comes to the creative process, your instincts are absolutely to be trusted. Now, what excites you the most? Knowing where you're going and figuring out how you're going to get there? Having no idea where you're going and being surprised when you arrive? Or having kind of a basic idea and kind of salivating at all the bunny trails you're going to get to go down along the way? Now, in terms of the information, and this is question number 4, in terms of the information that you need in order to make the story real or to give your nonfiction piece the voice of authority, are you more likely to do all the research up front before you write, or start writing and then stop when you need to know something and go figure it out? Or do you just write that first draft, make notes when there are gaps in your knowledge, and then go back and fill those in? Or, as I've heard some authors say, most of them fantasy writers, I don't look things up, I just make stuff up. Kind of am in awe of that. Then number 5, when you're starting to write, how do you like? Do you like to feel completely calm and confident, like you've got this thing together? Or do you like a little anxiety, some nervousness, maybe even full out fear because it's the adrenaline that keeps you moving? Or you like to be so pumped up with inspiration that you can't sit still. You have to pee every 5 minutes. Now, that's not going to last, nor should it, or we'd probably kill ourselves. But what do you like to feel when you start? Because if you don't feel that, then your creative process needs some looking at. And finally, question number 6. At what point in the writing do you get bogged down? Because everybody does. Is it before you even start and you're just paralyzed because you just know you're going to make a hot mess out of the whole thing? Is it after chapter 2 when you can't stop yourself from going back and tweaking and polishing and editing and you just can't get yourself to move to chapter 3? Is it several chapters in when you realize this is great writing, but you haven't got a clue where the story's going? Is it at the climax of the story when it's really going well, but you completely lost the thread of what the story is about? Or when you're finished with the first draft, you know it needs some more work, but you hate the editing part. And so you just tend to want to put it in a drawer and go on to something new that's sparkling and shiny. Now, the most important part of that question is part 2, which is, what do you do when you find yourself in the bog? And this is creative as well. How do you trick yourself? How do you work with your own mind to get yourself going again? So, do you read what you've written before, some other thing, some other project that really went well, maybe even got published, to reassure yourself that you do know what you're doing? You did it once, you can do it again. And then you turn to the page. Do you print out those first 2 chapters, lock them in a drawer, give the key to a trusted friend who is not a pushover so that you can't look at it again until you write 5 more chapters? Now, that's a symbolic act because, of course, you can look at your computer document anytime you want to. Sometimes doing something kind of in the manner of a ritual will help it to stay in your mind. You don't want to disappoint yourself by breaking into that drawer. You set the thing aside for a while and hang out with your character. Y'all go and have a mani-pedi together, or go skateboarding, or go to Dillard's and pick out her dream wardrobe. Maybe you'll even buy it. Do you make a diagram of where the plot has gone so far so you can check out those bunny trails and get yourself back on track? When you're done, if you just hate the editing part, do you let someone that you trust and who will be honest but gentle read your manuscript and then give you 3 areas that you might need to work on? And then approach those 3 areas as if you're doing it for the first time. Fool yourself by using that same fun, creative process that you used when you started. Now, go back and read the answers to all those questions. That's why it's important to write them down. And see if you can come up with a description of your own unique individual writing process. You don't have to name it intentional or intuitive. You don't even have to see it on this spectrum, though hopefully that will help you. Just use your answers to the questions as your guide. Because creatively elaborating on our process in detail about what works for us and what doesn't is vital at this point. No matter what you've been told by some well-meaning teacher or mentor, no matter what your writing group has said about the way it's supposed to be done, we can really only rely on what we know moves us. Now, a really simple way to do this, and probably the most fun, is, since we're writers and we think in images, why not come up with a simile for the way you work? For instance, my creative process is like untangling a necklace with a really fine chain, and it's hopelessly knotted. Or my creative process is like following a deer through the snow. Or my creative process is like a Socratic dialogue. Or my creative process is like throwing idea spitballs against the wall and seeing what sticks. Whatever that is, keep it ever before you. Maybe create some kind of actual symbol to have on your desk or your writing space so that you know if this isn't what it feels like, I'm doing it wrong. And you're the only one that can determine what wrong is. A couple of words of caution. First of all, give it a solid try before you decide this isn't working and chuck the whole thing, like after 10 minutes. Or be willing to tweak it. This is working, this is not. Don't start all over again. Just look at your design and see where the flaws are. See how you can stitch it all together. And most of all, own it. Scribblies, don't listen if someone tells you it's wrong. Or if someone says that's not the way real writers do it. Or your process is just way too weird. Oh, my fellow scribblies, we are a whole lot of weird. It's our job. That's what makes us scribbling women. So if you want to ponder this more carefully, have the questions in front of you, and take advantage of a bonus exercise, then go to nancyrue.com to the blog this week and take your time in again, pondering the questions and really taking the time to figure out what's my design? What is my creative design? If you'd like to continue with our series of more concrete ways to move forward with those beautiful intentions of yours, no matter how ugly they may look to somebody else, then feel free to subscribe to the blog. Now, this week on Facebook, which is nancyrue.com, I'm going to outline the process I used for my most recent release, More Than a Footnote, which is available on Amazon. So if you want to check that out, I'll just give it a step-by-step because I am nothing if not mostly intentional and with a few polka dots of intuitive. So until next time, Scribblies, scribble on.